Hi, I'm Ray McAllister, editor of Boomer Magazine. We're back with Harvey Newquist, the executive director of the National Guitar Museum. Welcome, Harvey. I finally got that out.
Thank you.
You're in town to discuss the guitar, the instrument, the Rock the World exhibit at the Science Museum of Virginia.
Correct.
And we've been going through the history of guitar. And I think now we're up to the era that a lot of us recognize, and that's when rock and roll started.
Yeah, very much so. The guitar during the 50s went from being something that was played on acoustic primarily to something that became very popular amongst teenagers in the late 50s. I mean, the first guitar was introduced, electric guitar was really introduced in 1949 that people could play. That wasn't used for Hawaiian music. So by the time it made its way into stores and the public consciousness, it was the late 50s. And you finally had something that made these great sounds that had never been done before. And a lot of that had to do with amplification and the fact that the guitar created sounds that no one had ever heard before. So not only do you have this boomer generation that's kind of changing the way it's looking at life from previous generations, but you have an instrument that's never existed before either. So you have the boomers with their very own instrument, almost born at the same time they were, that they could grow up with and sort of mold and turn into an instrument that projected the way they felt. So you had people, especially in the American East Coast and in London, who embraced the guitar to the point that they created actually new forms of music. So as we were talking about earlier, you had the Beatles, or you had pop bands that were using the guitar in ways that had never been, that any instrument had ever been used, loudly, in the forefront, and recording technology made it such that anybody with a really good idea could go to a local recording studio and record something, and in some cases they'd get famous, in some cases they wouldn't. But it was sort of an instrument that everyone of our generation could say, that's ours. It wasn't our parents. Our parents were accordions and swing bands and all those things.
Big band music, right.
Right, and here we have something that's ours, and our parents kind of sneered at it to some degree.
Which made it better.
Which did. My parents actually were very supportive, so I was lucky in that way. But most parents, it created the devil's music. And, in the hands of really gifted players like, Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Page and Ritchie Blackmore and guys that created completely new sounds, we had the birth of rock and roll.
Well, a lot of that came, at least in my estimation, came from the British invasion.
Correct.
That's where we all have to, going back to bands like the Yardbirds.
Oh yeah, and the Kinks and sounds that
everybody picks up. Everybody who's listening to this is playing the song in their head now, right?
And then you had things like Jimmy Page. And that didn't sound anything like Glenn Miller.
No, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, none of those people sounded like Glenn Miller.
No, and they took this instrument, made it their own, and it became the defining instrument of our generation. Nothing even comes close. To this day, there are more electric guitars sold in America than all other instruments combined. And to think that the electric guitar wasn't sold really before the early 50s, the fact that now there are over 3 million a year sold and it dwarfs the combined sale of all other instruments shows how important it's become.
Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We'll be back for another episode, and we'll talk a little bit more about this because I've got some questions for you.
Okay.
And make sure you check out our YouTube channel for more of the videos with Harvey.